Well, welcome, gang. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Denise Etter, and we are going to be presenting on coworker relationships. And this is how to play nice in the sandbox. So the goals of the presentation today are fairly straightforward. We're going to talk about understanding personalities. We're going to talk about better understanding means of communication and how to avoid some of the pitfalls that commonly can occur. We're also going to address conflict, because we hate that it happens, but more so how to resolve it. So, and the biggest piece we want to talk about is how do we enhance the ability to have better clinic harmony. So basically for our outline today, we're going to be looking at personality traits. You were given a DISC profile at the beginning of your start, and that was in your onboarding process. So we're going to reference back to that. So it would be good for you to have that handy, take a look at it, and think through where you are as a good starting point. We're also going to talk about communication skills, as well as some techniques on how to improve that and how to read another person a little bit better. Additionally, we're going to talk about some teamwork basis, and finally the conflict resolution. So one of the pieces that we mentioned was the personality traits. And with the use of the DISC, we referenced to a book that is called Talk is Not Cheap. Beverly Inman wrote this book, but just wanted you to see the cover of that so that if you would like to follow up further on this later, it'll give you a great way to reference. So what is the DISC personality? Well, it is a universal study. It first came out about 85 plus years ago at this point, and was started out as a study of looking at behaviors. It then became something that was used as a tool and is used universally throughout the world now. So we as a company have adopted this, we utilize it as well. So one of the things we want to take a look at is how is this broken out? So there are 4 basic different types of personalities. And if you take a line and draw through horizontally, the ones on the top are your D and your I. These are your extroverts. If you look below that horizontal line, you'll see we have the C and the S. Those are your introverted personality types. If you take a line and put it through vertically, everything that is on the left, your D and your C, these are more task-oriented folks. And then to the right, these are your I and your S. These folks are more people-oriented. So let's start with the D. We'll talk about this one first. As you recall, this was the extroverted and the task-oriented. So they're very domineering, driven, very much about daring. They're willing to take chances. Now each of these you will see we have a caricature. So the first one you can see that there's a part of this man's face that's a little larger than the rest. And in this case, it would be his nose. D's are inherently nosy. They like to know what's going on and be in the know. And they bring a lot of value to an organization because they tend to be entrepreneurs, they're risk takers. They like to get things done and they like to go after it. Now, one weakness is sometimes they're not as good with the people skill on this piece. Their goal is to control things and make sure things go as they feel they need to go. And their emotion can be anger. So those are a couple of the pieces we want to be aware of and understand, especially for folks that we're interacting with in our daily lives. So here is a list, and you're going to have a reference list just like this on the do's and don'ts of communication. And I think the biggest one you want to look at is you just want to make sure you really give them bottom line first. If you give them the fill-in details first, they tend to tune it out, they become impatient, and they want that bottom line first. So let's talk a little bit about the I personality. These are your extroverts, more people-oriented folks. Again, if you look at the caricature, what's the large part of this person's face is their mouth. These folks are very talkative. They love to talk and chat, and they love to be the life of the party. These people are very influential. They tend to be a little on the impulsive side. They love to introduce new things, introduce themselves. They're very excited about life. They're very optimistic. They tend to bring a lot of energy to organizations and a lot of drive on helping to get things going. And they'll get everybody on the wagon. Come on, let's be a part of this operation, and can really be excited about it. The weakness, though, can be follow through. A lot of times they have difficulty staying on the task until it's finished. They get excited about it, they start it, but not necessarily complete it. Their goal is to influence people. They want to influence others to be a part of what they think is important. And their emotion is optimism. They definitely see everything as being the glass is half full. So when you communicate, we just talked about that facial features. Eyes love to talk. So when you communicate with them, you want to listen first. You want to hear their story, because once they've said what they have to say, they're going to be more open to hearing what you have to say. And again, you'll have this list, so we'll be referencing that in the time when we have our breakout with this group. The third personality type is the S. Now, if you look again up in that quadrant, this is your introverted folks. These are your people-oriented. Steady, stable, same. These folks are tried and true, consistent players. These are great listeners. Thus, what's the largest feature in the picture? Their ears. So this is important for you to understand that these are great listeners, but it can be very easy to take advantage of that feature, and we want to make sure that we actually give them a chance to express themselves as well. Their weakness tends to be confrontation. They do not like to go head-to-head with folks. Their goal, they want to maintain some kind of consistency. They want to keep the harmony, and their emotion is masked. These are the folks you don't ever want to play poker against, because they are going to whoop you. So when you communicate with them, it's okay to ask these folks about what's happening in their personal lives. Include that. How's your dog doing? How's your grandchild doing? How was your weekend? How did you enjoy this? They like to talk about those types of things. The biggest piece that I would say with an S is to be sincere, because if they perceive that you are not being straight up with them, they tend to close that out very quickly, and you can lose trust. If you lose trust, you're done. It's really hard to regain that. So that's one of the biggest things, is to ensure that you're giving them the detail they need, but you're being very clear and very, very sincere. The fourth personality type is the C. And this is the introvert that is task-oriented. They are very cranial. They're compliant, they're conscientious, and they're cautious. If you look at the caricature, the large feature in this picture is their forehead, because they're very intelligent. There's a lot of cranium, a lot of brain going on here. These are the folks that if you were to ask, hey, what's the weather outside like? They'll tell you it's 87.2 degrees and there's a 31.6% chance of rain. They're going to give you the details, and it's going to be very logical, and they love explanations. Their weakness, flexibility. Everything is on course, and they don't care to have that rattled. Their goal, to be right. They're very logical, and they like the details on things. Emotion is fear, and fear is often caused by anything that creates inconsistency or sort of rattles the cage. So that's usually, if things are tried and true and they understand the logic behind things, it'll often take away the fear for them. So these are the four basic personality types. And if you look at where the C is, the biggest thing is that you want to be patient with these folks. These folks need to know that you're going to hear what they have to say. They have a lot of detail, it's well thought out, and they want someone to hear what it is and then also communicate with them in a way that gives them the detail that they require. So now that you have all four of these personalities, I think it's really cool because you can understand better what you're about, but probably more important is taking those traits and understanding what everybody else is about and using that. When you're in the clinic, a really cool way to test this out is with your patients. And when you're taking a subjective history, listen to how they're communicating it. If they are coming at you pretty hard and they are telling you exactly bottom line, I fell down the stairs and I broke my ankle and that's that, and what are you going to do about it? You can hear things that are like a D. Versus someone that says, well, it was 8:15 and I was preparing to go to work and I missed the first step by about 2 inches, resulting in a fall of 16.3 feet. And give you those details, you know you're dealing more with a C, so that you can modify the way that you communicate with a patient. So it can also be used outside of just the coworker relations in your clinic with your staff. It can also be used with your patients. It works fantastic at home as well. So this is definitely something you can use universally across the board. So we've talked about personalities and understanding that piece. Now with communication and how do we do this and do this well? Well, there's three parts of it that contribute. We have talking, listening, and body language. And on the talking, we just gave you 4 sheets that do's and don'ts of each personality type. Gives you a lot of great tricks to use to make sure that you're communicating well. So do the best that you can to sort of size up who you're talking to and how they're going to receive it. And so, for example, if a patient asks me, well, what's going on? And I think they're an I, and I want to say, well, it looks like you really kind of bummed this up, and we're going to need to get some work done to take good care of you. And just giving them a vague answer, thinking that's what they want, and they start digging and prying, I may have missed the mark. So I will adjust accordingly, give them more detail, and start honing in on how better to communicate to give them what they need. But reading back, how are they receiving the information you're giving? Listening, probably one of the most valuable and underrated skills of communication. There's an old saying that you have 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. We have a bad habit of doing it in reverse. We need to listen. We need to really hear what someone's saying. And we have a whole list here on the board that shows different levels of listening. So it goes anywhere from ignoring listening down to empathetic. And empathetic listening is when you're really coming back to them and verifying you're hearing them, but going another level. So saying something like, wow, that must have been a really tough situation. How did you handle that? And really engaging in what they just said to you. The last piece of it is the body language, and it's important not only to think about how you're projecting to someone, but also reading how they are holding their bodies in place as to where they are. So, for example, on a head posture piece, the more straight up that I have my head in perfect alignment, so we could take a plumb line if we wanted to go in therapy terms, that's going to be a very confident, dominant personality reading that they're going to get, that I am coming at them very dominant. If I do just a little bit of a head tilt, this is more of a reception, that I'm more engaged and I'm connecting with the person. Same thing on the body. If I'm straightforward and coming at someone, it can be perceived as confrontational versus just a little bit of an angle will give just a little bit more of a read that there isn't that confrontation piece. So in situations that may be more uncomfortable, or if there's conflict resolution, you can use those tools. Additionally, realizing that when you smile, a real smile will fade away versus turn on and off. Because if your smile turns on and off, it's not legit. People are going to realize that, and they're going to really think that you're not being sincere. And no one can trust someone that isn't sincere. So watching that we're not trying to project something that we're not really believing inside. Additionally is eye contact, and they use a lot of these pieces that are on your screen that talk about looking up or looking different directions and to determine if people are not being honest. But it's kind of nice to know that if someone's looking up, they're not being rude to you per se. They're trying to remember something, and they're probably looking for some kind of visual cue of some kind of recollection of what they're trying to share with you. So looking in different directions when you see people doing that is usually recalling or creating information. So we've talked about personalities, we've talked about communication. Let's talk about teamwork. Teamwork is one of those things that we've all had some level of encounter with. If you go back to elementary school memories, can you remember going to the cafeteria, walking down the hall, and everyone had to be quiet? There was a teamwork effort that had to go in place to meet that goal of going down the hall without disrupting everyone else. Simple examples like that. Or it was being on your first Little League baseball team, or doing your first dance recital with a group. There's teamwork that goes back throughout our lives. So we've had a lot of pieces, and a lot of these are inherent, things that you already know. But sometimes it's good to just bring it to the forefront and really think about it, and how can we always be better team members. There's a book by John Maxwell that is infiltrated throughout the company, the 17 Essential Qualities of a Team Player. And I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's chapter by chapter on each different trait. So it's easy just to take a chapter and dissect it at a time. And a fairly easy read, and I would highly recommend it, because being a great team player can never be overrated. And a couple of the qualities I pulled for you. First one being adaptable. And adaptability and flexibility are fairly interchangeable in this term, but if an individual is not able to be adaptable, it makes it very hard for them to roll with any changes that come down the pipeline. And one of my favorite expressions is, the only thing you can count on in life is change. Change is going to happen, so being able to adapt to those really makes for a great team player. Collaboration, being collaborative. Interestingly, that this is also one of our values as a company, and the idea of the collective genius. Working together to find a bigger win. The more people involved in focusing on one thing, it really can create a bigger and better win. A lot of times folks will be asked, are you a collaborator or are you in competition? And if there is in-house rivalry going on, a lot of times it will end up destructing for both people versus being instrumental for both people rising. There's room to grow and go if you allow yourself to work together. The last thing that's on this slide is what's in it for me versus what's in it for the team. Really important. A lot of times if we can think about what is the greater good for the team, for the company, for the clinic, for the patient, versus what's in my own personal best interest, will often lead to a greater good. Enlarging. This is when I like to say you make people larger than life. When you are really highlighting something that someone does well. So for example, at a staff meeting, you take a moment and one of your colleagues, you say, wow, I really just want to give a big shout out to John. He did an amazing job last week. We were very busy and really rose to the occasion. And giving people kudos for what they're doing and making everything a celebration. And it's just an incredibly valuable skill. It adds value to the teammates. It adds value to the team. Selfless. Obviously, this is the opposite of being selfish. Selfless is putting others before oneself. Not always easy, not always comfortable, but the more it can be done, the more we're living the values of what we think is important for this company. We put our patients first. If we also put our team first, it's going to be a huge deposit in with those individuals, that you take them seriously, you find value with them, and you respect them. Huge, huge important piece. Also the idea of the value of interdependence. We talk a lot about autonomy and wanting to be that autonomous practitioner, but again, if we're working with others and giving, it often is going to have better results for everyone involved. So we just talked about some of the values. And what happens when you take those values and apply them? Well, working with your staff, what does this look like? There's a concept called worthwhile work, and it comes from Ken Blanchard. He has a book out that's gung-ho, and it's all about the teamwork idea. And the idea is that work is not just important, it's worthwhile. So if you were to take an example like a tech cleaning down the tables, that seems important, but actually it's worthwhile. Because what would happen if that tech did not do their job and did not do their job well? You would have dirty tables that really had germs that maybe someone else could transmit to themselves and become very, very ill. So then this could in turn end up really, I know that sounds crazy, but a life or death type of thing. So a lot of the things we look at as just being important are actually worthwhile. And the concept comes from the idea of squirrels collecting nuts, that if they don't store up enough nuts for the winter, they won't survive. So that work is worthwhile. it's beyond important. So if you can look around at your colleagues and realize what they're doing and see the worthwhile nature of their work. If an OC doesn't get the information to verify benefits and it is incorrect, and in the end it's a big mistake and we have to write the whole thing off and we can't collect for the services provided, how long could we continue to do that and be able to afford to keep the lights on in a facility? It's worthwhile. It's worthwhile work. Shared goals. Very important for us to understand what the clinic as a whole is trying to accomplish and being a part of that and supporting other people in the parts that they're doing. I know a lot of clinics are working on WIGs, wildly important goals, and typically every team member has a piece where they're contributing on trying to make that goal happen. But shared goals are essential. In order for a team to move forward, if everybody has their own little goals going, it's not going to be collective, it won't be unified, and it won't be as successful. So, and then understanding what others do and how it contributes to the big picture. Take a moment when you have it to spend time with different team members and walk through their world. Find out what it is they do and how they do it. And one, I think you're going to be amazed because it's pretty impressive what people are doing and how much detail it requires and how much attention to getting it done accurately. But really taking time to understand the roles of your teammates and knowing what that's about. And then the last question on this piece is, who are your teammates? I think the easy answer is you could walk around your clinic and point out everybody that works there, the office coordinator, the clinic director, the therapist, the techs. It's pretty straightforward. But what about maybe the indirect team members? What about the people like your sales team, your regional area directors, your regional assistants? What about all the people that provide services at the business office? If you didn't have someone taking care of the billing or the credentialing or the marketing or the sales or all these different pieces that happen, would we have a complete team? Would we have a complete package occurring in the clinic? And I think that we can all agree that these are team members as well. So remembering to treat them with the same courtesy and same level of communication and understanding that we've addressed that would be directly related to the people in your clinic. So now we have all this great stuff. We have these tools. We have the understanding of personalities and how to communicate and understand about being a team player. We've got it, right? We can end right now. Well, unfortunately, sometimes things arise where we do have conflict and we have to address that. So let's talk a little bit first about what often creates a conflict. Typically, it's a matter of a difference in perception and understanding that perception is something that we individually have that's different than everyone else's because it's a collection of life experiences and memories and values that have been created from that. And no two people have walked the same walk, so everyone's perceptions are going to be slightly different. We're not going to have identical thumbprints that look the same in this fashion. So there's going to be times when we don't see things eye to eye. So how do we prepare to deal with addressing a conflict? Well, first you want to really stop and think, what is the problem, and identify exactly what the problem is. And take out all the extraneous other stuff. Keep it very, very simple and straightforward of a specific problem. Take perception into account and view the problem from both sides as best that you can. You may not be able to do that ahead of time, but be prepared to hear the other person's side when you actually do meet. Request a time to talk. This may be a burning hot issue for you and you want it addressed right away, and getting it addressed quicker than later makes a lot of sense. But if you blast in and tell a colleague, hey, I really need to talk to you right now, and they're in the middle of something really critical, worthwhile work, it's probably not going to be received real well. So set up a meeting time and be respectful of some boundaries for those folks so they can come in prepared as well. then the biggest thing that you want to do is you want to really prepare going into that meeting, and you want to practice, and you want to make sure that you have a sense of what you want to say and how you want to say it. Use all the tools we've already talked about in making sure it's addressed well. Remember what the personality type is of the person you're talking to, and use the do's and don'ts checklist. It's really valuable, and it can really help you. So, a couple of other communication tips to address the problem. Make sure you think about their communication style. Think before you speak. A lot of times when conflict situations are occurring, heat will rise. So stop and think before it comes out, and make sure it's what you really want to say. Keep to the topic. It's really easy to start adding in. My poor husband is victim of this, and I'll confess to you right now that all of a sudden I'll tell him that I really want him to be better about taking out the trash, and then the next thing I'm like, and you know, it really provokes me that 3 times last week you didn't make the bed. Don't add in extra stuff. Make sure that you're sticking to the topic, the one piece, and my husband will appreciate if I take this advice as well. Make sure you listen, hear the other side. Really actively listen, empathetically listen. Make sure you're hearing what they say. And then read their body language. In particular, if they are starting to shut down on you, you may need to back off, or you may need to take a time out and set up round 2. So the actual conflict meeting, identify the main point, express your concerns objectively. Make sure that you use a positive approach, focus on the behavior rather than the person. If you start saying you, they're going to take it very personally and very defensively. So really important that you make sure that you focus on what it is that's the situation and how can you both resolve this. Make sure to listen, avoid interruptions. If they're telling you something and you want to rebuttal it, hold on to that thought and save it for the end. Let them speak and really express themselves completely. Be sure to have suggestions on what you think would be a good resolution. But the key thing is be prepared that as you have this conversation, that thought process can change. Hear what they have to say, and what you thought was a completely sure tight case going into it, you may go, whoa, I hadn't thought of it from that angle before. And be prepared to make some changes. And the last point on this is be prepared to meet in the middle. The idea on this is that there is a third alternative. The idea is that it is a win-win belief that it's not my way, it's not your way, it's a better way where we combine things together and actually come up with a better idea than either of the two parties could have done individually. So with that being said, plenty of tools for you to utilize. And I wish you all the best on continuing to seek more clinic harmony. And if you need anything in the future, please do not hesitate to contact me. Again, my name is Denise Etter, and I look forward to hearing about your future in clinic harmony. Thanks.